I get this question all the time. When will India become a Vishwaguru? When will India become a superpower? And my answer is always the same. Let's not focus on status symbols like superpower status and Vishwaguru status. Let's focus on actual growth and development. So, the real question for me is, can India become a great power by the year 2047? If you're Indian, you know why I've taken the year 2047. And what do I mean by a great power? I mean a top two economy, top two military. See, today in 2023, India is the fifth largest economy in the world. India will become the third largest economy in the world in the next 2 to 3 years, by 2026 for sure. So let's not focus on top three, let's focus on top two. Can India become a $30 trillion economy by the year 2047? So for me, the answer is yes, we can. I'm convinced we can, but it's going to be a hard climb. It's going to be very difficult to get there, but it's not impossible. So then the question is, how do we get there? And that's what this video is about, how India can do this. Please subscribe and let's find out how India can become a great power by the year 2047. So to become a great power by the year 2047, India will have to focus on seven sectors, seven core interests, vital national interests. It's the economy, it's the national security, it's diplomacy, energy security, education, rooting out corruption, reforming colonial institutions, and promoting Indian culture as well as tourism. These are the seven core sectors for me that India needs to really focus on. So national interest has it's like a bunch of concentric circles. You have the core interests or vital interests of the seven, the ones that I just spoke about. Then you have important interests on the outside, and then you have peripheral interests as well. So right now, India is a developing country. India is a low income country. India is what they call a third world country. So India needs to focus on the fundamentals, on the core vital interests, those seven that I spoke about. Let's start with the economy. So India's economy is doing reasonably well. Our GDP, annual GDP, is about $3.75 trillion as of today, 2023, but it's still a very low income nation. The India's GDP per capita is about 2.25 or 2.3 thousand dollars per capita, which is comparable to various countries in, let's say, Africa, and we know what the conditions are in Africa right now because of neo-colonization. So India is a low income nation. India needs to become a middle income nation ASAP, as soon as possible, which is, let's say, $10,000 per capita per year. So to do that, India has to reform lots of things. We need to focus on the economy. There needs to be reforms in how business, let's say, how business is done. We need to improve the ease of doing business. Right now, it's much easier than in the past. Doing business, being an entrepreneur, starting a small business, MSME, large business, whatever. But there are so many obstacles and problems even today: red tape, corruption, various regulations and rules. So much can be improved. So first of all, we need to focus on the ease of doing business. Then we need to focus on manufacturing goods and exporting them. We also have the world's largest market, 1.4 billion people. So domestic consumption can also be a major driver of economic growth. But India needs to start the process of replacing China as the world's manufacturing destination. Lots of nations are now trying to move away from China and create alternative places for where they get their goods and products manufactured. It's a great opportunity for India. Let's not let this go to Vietnam or some other countries. Nothing against them, but why not it come to India? So India needs to make it to, let's say, roll out the red carpet for foreign investors, for foreign manufacturers. Come to India, make in India. So India needs to become a manufacturing powerhouse. India needs to focus on exports as well as domestic consumption. India needs to focus on bottom-up growth, on grassroots development. Growth and development should not happen only in some locations. In the past, it was just a few cities, four metropolitan cities, Mumbai, it was then called Bombay, and so on. Indian growth today needs to be organic, grassroots level up. It should happen everywhere, in small villages, in tier 2, tier 3 cities, also in big cities. So we need to see development all around the country. Certain parts of the country have been neglected, terribly neglected for such a long time. You draw a line in the middle of the nation, and you will see that the eastern part is always underdeveloped, especially the far east or the northeast. But even states like Odisha and the eastern states of India are relatively underdeveloped for whatever reason, historical reasons. So these imbalances and deficiencies need to be addressed. So India needs bottom up grassroots level development, and India needs to focus on job creation because we have an enormous population. We have new uh, new entrants into the job market every year, millions of them. We need to create sufficient jobs for them, and to do that we need to create jobs in for that. The manufacturing sector and the business sector, the industrial sector, all of that are great destinations, or a great way to manufacture jobs, to create new jobs. So in the economy is going to be the driver of India's growth, in India's progress. Everything comes from the economy. I mean, they say that money cannot buy you happiness, but show me a single person who is broke who's also happy. Unless you want to be a yogi in the Himalayas, which is maybe a one in a million kind of thing, unless you have that sort of thing, you need money. Because what money does is that it opens up opportunities for you, and it gives you the freedom to do what you want with your time. Without money, you don't have that. So money will not buy you happiness. It will buy you opportunities, options, and freedom. And if you use those wisely, you will be happy. So this applies to individuals. It applies to nations as well. So India needs to focus on the economy. So economy is the first sector that which is vital for India to focus on. That's going to be the primary driver of India's growth. Secondly, it's national security. India has to grow militarily as well as economically. When Julius Caesar conquered Greece, he must have asked himself, he must have seen all the great Greek monuments and all that, and he must have asked himself, what's the point of creating all this wonderful art and architecture and all this if you are not in a position to defend it? So you can have the best culture and civilization in the world, but you need to be able to defend it. Otherwise, it's pointless. So India needs to focus on national security, the military. So military, we have the army, air force, and the navy. So we need to modernize these arms of the military, of the Indian military. We need to focus on technology. You may have a million soldiers, and you even if the enemy has a million soldiers, you can still defeat them with 10,000 soldiers if you have the right technology, because technology is a force multiplier. So India needs to start focusing on the cutting edge technology, on the best technology, on acquiring the best technology and inducting it into the armed forces. So that's what needs to happen. India needs to have sufficient stockpiles of ammunition and missiles, and keep creating better missiles. Don't be happy with the 2 or 3 or 15 variants that we have. Keep on improving them. So we are obviously doing that, but that's something that has to be always, we should always be conscious of. So modernization of the military, of the various forces, army, navy, air force. We need to focus on indigenization, atmanirbharta. We need to focus on developing our own fighter planes, ideally strategic heavy bombers and whatnot, and drones, UAVs, stealth aircraft, and so on. We need to focus on artificial intelligence and robotics as well in the armed forces. And we need to bolster our navy. We always keep saying, we are fond of saying that the Indian Ocean is our strategic backyard. Well, act like it is by having a sufficiently large navy. The naval force is not large enough to own the Indian Ocean. I'm not saying we need to own the Indian Ocean all the way to Antarctica, but India should have a presence in the region that we call our strategic backyard, and a visible presence. Any foreign ship that passes through the region should know that the Indians are here and they are watching us, then they are aware of us. So we need numbers. Quantity has a quality of its own. Thus said Joseph Stalin, and he was right. We need to have large numbers of surface and subsurface combatant vessels. We need to focus on submarines, various kinds of submarines, nuclear submarines, attack submarines, other submarines as well, missile boats, various kinds of ships apart from the couple of aircraft carriers that we already have. So all of that needs to happen. We need a much more expanded and powerful and modernized navy, army, navy, air force, and let's not forget space. Space is an extremely important component of your military outlook. The reason why the space race happened in the 20th century was because of the military dimension of space. Otherwise, there was no incentive for the US and the USSR to try and outpace each other, because space is synonymous with the military, whether we realize it or not. In the civilian sphere of life, space is highly militarized. So India needs to ensure that it is not left behind in the space race. There's a new space race that's happening right now. There's a moon rush that's happening right now. India needs to ensure that its space capabilities are not inferior to those of the top three nations or top five nations. So space is something we need to focus on, and of course, cyber security. So India is not renowned for being a cyber security world power, let's say, a major cyber security power. India, maybe we have the capabilities, but we don't advertise them, which is a good thing. But we need to ensure that we keep up with the latest advances in cyber security, offensively as well as defensively. So that's something India needs to take care of. And of course, like I mentioned, artificial intelligence, robotics, quantum computing. Let's not be left behind in any of these domains. So that is about the military aspect of national security. Now there are other aspects too. We live in a dangerous neighborhood. We have Pakistan, the temporary nation of Pakistan, which occupies parts of Kashmir, Gilgit Baltistan. We have Chinese occupied Tibet. They also occupy Oxygen and some other parts of Indian territory. This is an issue that needs to be solved once and for all before 2047, ideally much earlier. So the Pakistan issue is a long-standing issue. It's not the Kashmir issue; it's the Pakistan issue. So that needs to be dealt with. The Chinese occupied Tibet issue also needs to be dealt with, either by demarcating the border, making the Chinese come to the negotiation table, and finalizing the demarcation of the border, or through some other means. You can only have peace through strength. So the neighborhood issue, the two front war specter has to be addressed properly and addressed permanently. And then, like General Bipin Rawat said, there's a 2.5 front war issue as well, which means that there are certain elements within India that are inimical to India's national security and India's existence as a nation. That also needs to be dealt with. Some of it is because of massive illegal immigration, especially from the eastern side of the nation. Millions allegedly of individuals from a couple of countries have crossed into India, and they are known to live all across India. Everyone knows who they are, right? So that is an issue that, I mean, that is unacceptable. India is not Holiday Inn that anybody can come in and acquire papers and just settle down. That's not how things work. This is a long-term threat for India and these individuals. I have nothing against immigration, as long as it's legal. India is open to people from all over the world to come and immigrate to, as long as they do it legally through the right process. Right? My issue is with the illegal immigration. The people who think that they have the right to come into India and become citizens or whatever, and get special rights and privileges that normal Indian citizens don't have. So that is something that needs to be dealt with. First of all, the eastern borders and all borders need to be secured, if required, fenced. And then all of these aliens need to be identified and they need to be repatriated to their home countries. Nothing against anybody, but this is a process that needs to happen for India's national security. And then we still have the 2.5 front angle, which means certain Indian citizens who act against India. Now, this happens because of the good old colonial practice of divide and rule, divide and conquer. So today, it's no longer necessary for you to invade a country, conquer a country, and occupy it by force to divide and rule. You can do it remotely today. All you have to do is fund and finance certain people in a country, in the target country. And we know there are enormous amounts of foreign funds coming into India, and they allegedly may be, they may be routed to certain, allegedly, possibly, certain specific political parties, or certain possibly media outlets, or maybe certain religious organizations. I am not naming anyone, I'm not pointing fingers at anybody in specific, okay? But we know how this works. So this is a problem that needs to be dealt with. Eventually, all this foreign funding needs to be cut off, and those individuals need to be identified and brought to and dealt with appropriately as per the rule, as per the law of the land. So all of this needs to be dealt with. This all comes under national security, which is a vital interest of the nation. It's a vital issue, and this needs to be, national security needs to be tightened. In the past, it's been terrible. Now things are getting better, but we know what problems exist in various parts of the country. If India wants to be a great power by 2047, this really needs to be addressed. The next sector is diplomacy. So the US has more than 15,000 diplomatic employees, right, who serve in various embassies and consulates and diplomatic offices all across the world. China and Russia have between 9 to 12,000 diplomatic employees. Nations like the UK, France, and Germany have between 7 to 9,000 diplomatic employees. So does Japan. China maybe also has this same number of diplomatic employees like Russia, like I said. When it comes to India, India has between 7 to 900 diplomats. Maybe less, but let's say it's a number between 700 to 900. India has less diplomats than Singapore, which is a city state. That's the kind of situation we are in now. What are the consequences of not having sufficient diplomats? It means that you cannot engage with various nations constructively and in mutually beneficial ways, and you will miss out on lots of opportunities because of that. India is a nation that's rising on the global stage. It's already being perceived as a reasonably great power, as one of the major nations in the world now. And India needs to be able to engage with a wide array of nations, especially in the global south, especially like-minded nations, nations with we have a convergence of interests. And you can't expect one or two people to do everything. You can't expect Dr. Jaishankar or the foreign minister or maybe the prime minister to go and do all the diplomacy for you. You need to have subject matter experts. You need to have experts in various fields, experts. So we need to first of all have a core diplomatic a group of diplomatic employees, and then you need to have an auxiliary group of people who are subject matter experts, who can be regarded as consultants, who will work for the Indian Foreign Service as and when required. This could include scientists and experts in science and technology and research and development, experts in various nations, experts in various languages and cultures, and so on. So this is what needs to happen. So I would say that instead of having 7 to 900 diplomats, India should have 7 to 9,000 diplomats for it to engage with the world effectively. So how can this happen? How can we make this happen? It's very easy. We have a 1.4 billion population. We have some of the brightest minds in the world, youngsters, young kids, teenagers. There are so many kids today who have an incredible amount of interest in international relations. They ask me questions like, how can we serve the country? How can we contribute to geopolitics? Well, you can contribute to geopolitics by becoming diplomats, but the Indian Foreign Service needs to open up its doors and take in more people. I would say for the next 5 to 10 years, take in 1,000 new people every year, the cream of the lot, the best of the best, and that would significantly bolster the diplomatic core that India has. So this is something that needs to be taken up now. India can no longer afford to keep waiting for another decade or whatever for it to bolster its diplomatic service, the Indian Foreign Service. So diplomacy is something that India needs to focus on. The next field is energy security. If you want to destroy an economy, you starve that economy of energy. What's energy? Electricity, oil and gas. Electricity typically comes from burning petrochemicals, petroleum products, oil, gas and coal. So historically, traditionally, energy security has come from oil and gas and coal. Now, the same applies to India as well. So India imports much of its energy requirements from other countries. From when it comes to oil, it's typically nations in the Gulf region and nowadays Russia as well. Saudi Arabia, various Gulf nations, Russia. So India needs to diversify its energy portfolio. We need to import oil and petrochemical products from lots of countries, not just 2 or 3 countries. I'm sure we're looking into that. Prime Minister Modi has pledged to cut down India's emissions to net zero by the year 2070, and this includes a pledge to derive half of our energy from renewable sources by 2030. So India is going to focus. India is a founding member, the founder of the International Solar Alliance. So India is going to focus on solar energy, wind energy, various kinds of renewable energy, and all that. But we have to remember that renewable energy and green energy are capricious energy sources. They are not always reliable. In the night, there's no solar energy. You can't have solar energy in the night. When it's cloudy, you will generate less energy from solar than you would do on a sunny day. When it comes to wind power, well, the wind blows sometimes, sometimes it doesn't blow. So these energy sources are good to have, but they cannot give you all your energy security, and they cannot be relied upon to give you energy on demand. So if you're going to cut down on fossil fuels, then you need another source of energy. And India then therefore has to focus on nuclear energy. Nuclear energy is clean and green if done right. And India has excellent scientists and technicians, nuclear scientists, nuclear physicists, and all that. We have a long-running nuclear energy program, right? The three-stage nuclear energy program that was designed by Dr. Homi J. Bhabha. So India is currently somewhere between stage one and stage two of the three-stage program. We're actually at the end of stage one, and we are kind of dipping our toes into stage two. We should have been at stage three already. Stage three is thorium reactors that use a mixture of thorium 232 and uranium 233 as fuel, advanced heavy water reactors. We should have been there by now. We are not there yet. So what India needs to do, see, India has to import uranium for nuclear power, but India is home to at least a quarter of the entire world's thorium reserves. So thorium is a great bet for India. India should focus on thorium. So India needs to ensure that by 2047 it is firmly into stage three, the advanced heavy water reactors stage of the nuclear uh, energy program, reactors that use a mixture of thorium 232 and uranium 233 as the fuel. So that's where India needs to be. India needs to have a large array of such reactors by 2047 that will really take care of India's national energy security to a large extent. Take the example of France. France generates about 60 to 70% of its electricity from nuclear energy. India, why can't India do that? I think India can even surpass France in terms of nuclear energy generation. So India needs to look at all possible options when it comes to energy security. We still need to for the foreseeable future keep importing oil and gas from, especially oil from various countries, and we have excellent relations with nations like Saudi Arabia and Russia, also Iran. So we need to maintain that, but we need to also look for other energy sources. The green energy is good to have, solar and wind and all that, but nuclear energy has to be looked at very seriously and taken up on a war footing. The next sector is education. The education system that we have today is nothing but a remnant or a continuation of the 19th century colonial education system that was designed to churn out sheep. It was designed to churn out clerks and peons. The education system that we have today is not designed to churn out leaders and thought leaders. It's designed to churn out followers and sheep. And see, what's the purpose of education? The purpose of education is to produce bright, talented, capable, enthusiastic, energetic, ambitious, and confident young people who will go out into society and either produce something or solve the problems that society has. And some of them will go on to lead society. But the kids that come out of the education system are clueless, confused, and underconfident, and they can't solve a single problem. That's the issue that we face in the education system today. That's one of the issues we face. So the education system focuses on rote memorization and passing exams by memorizing entire paragraphs of text instead of actually acquiring genuine knowledge. And how do you acquire knowledge? You acquire knowledge by solving problems, by learning how to solve problems. How do you learn math? You solve math problems, right? How do you learn physics or chemistry or biology? You solve problems. Similarly, in the real world, there are so many problems that need to be solved, and we need to be able to solve those problems. And that's what the education system should ideally teach us. It should not be about acquiring degrees. It should be about acquiring skills and learning how to solve problems or create new things. Think of any business, any successful business. There are only two kinds of businesses overall: a business that either creates something which society needs, or a business that solves existing problems that society has. So to be a valuable and productive member of society, you need to be either able to create something for society or to solve problems. And the education system fails to give anybody either of these skills. So that's one problem that the education system has. The other issue is the way they teach Indian history and world history. So the approach to history that Indian historians have had for the past 70 years is the Marxist approach to history. How do Marxists approach history? What is the Marxist approach to historiography, writing history? Marxists will take a nation, look at a nation from the perspective of dividing the society into various, let's say, classes, and then they will portray one of these classes as the oppressor, and they will portray everybody else as the victims. And they will typically, if you want to destroy a country, you take the ones who are leading the country and serving the country, and you portray them as the oppressors. And then you create a sense of victimhood among the rest of the population. And this especially works in a country that's been destroyed by colonization and impoverished. Because everybody feels like a victim, nobody has money. So then you conveniently take the people who served the country as rulers, and and serve the country in various ways, and you take that class, percentage of the population, and you say that these people have been oppressing you for centuries. So that's the way Indian history has been studied by these Marxist historians, and they are the ones who have a monopoly on the writing of Indian history. And that's what Indians have been they have been teaching to Indians for generations. This started before 1947, and it still continues. We're still taught history the same way. False history. We have fake news, we have fake history as well. So that's a huge problem that we face with the education system. Because of this, kids grow up being ashamed of being Indian. They have no pride in being Indian. And then there's the question of the English language, which is still the dominant language in the Indian education system and India overall. So if you want to get a good job in the country, you need to be able to speak good English with a certain accent. You speak English with a Dehati accent, they're going to kick you out. So that's a huge issue. And these days the problem is that most kids grow up learning everything in English. Everybody wants to send their kids to a good convent school where they speak English, where they teach everything in English. And once you are cut off from your mother tongue, you are cut off from your roots, from everything your ancestors did, and you no longer really identify with your culture. So the education system is producing generation after generation of rootless, deracinated Indians. There is a saying in Norwegian, "Rotlaust tre fell," the rootless tree falls. That's what will happen to India unless this issue is addressed. Now, we can keep complaining that the government is doing nothing, or we can do something ourselves. So let's not wait for the government to eventually someday fix the education system. What parents need to do is to take the bull by the horns and try and address the issue themselves. See, at the end of the day, it's the job of the parents to ensure that their kids have the proper upbringing. You gotta teach. So what you got to do is you got to teach your kids the skills that the education system doesn't teach them. Spend some extra time with them and do this. Teach them personal finance. It's something the education system doesn't teach you. They will teach you economics and all that in college and university, but you got to be taught personal finance from the age 10 to 12. So that's not happening at all. So parents need to pick up where the education system is lacking. Teach your kids all these skills that they really need to acquire in the real world, and reconnect them with their mother tongue. Everybody needs to know how to read and write in their mother tongue. Ideally, everybody should read 3 to 5 books a year in their mother tongue. So this is an initiative that every individual needs to take, and only then we'll be able to produce the right kind of people who can serve the country. People who will be scientists or problem solvers or whatever, architects or good teachers or entrepreneurs, business people, whatever. We need these people to serve society, and that can only come through good education. We need leaders. That can only come through good education. So if the education system is not being fixed, it is up to the parents and the individuals to take it upon themselves to address the issue. So education system is a very big deal. And the other thing is that the universities in India, they don't focus on research at all. At all. I mean, there may be a few institutes here and there, in which a few handful of people may be trying to do some actual research, but that will be theoretical research, not applied research. Because for applied research, you need high quality equipment, good labs, and the less we say about the labs in India, the better. So this is something that needs to be addressed, and that can only be done either through private players, private universities, or the government uh, looking into this issue in all the universities that the government runs. So for that, what we need to focus on science and technology, and we need to focus on theoretical science, the fundamental research, and also applied research in development. And how do we do this? You know, you need to make people feel welcome, and you need to make people feel valued. When I say people, I mean researchers. You see, every year, tens of thousands of Indian kids who want to do real research leave India forever, go to the US or some other country, and they spend their lives there, and they contribute value to those nations and those societies and to those academic environments. It's a huge loss for India. And why does this happen? Because the Indian system does not value talent, right? So how do you value someone? How do you express the fact that you value someone? Do you give them a nice pat on the back? Do you give them a token award? That's not how you do it. The only genuine measure of value is money. You got to give them the money they deserve, world class salaries. So how do you do that? India has the money, the government has the money. So think about sport for us for a moment. Think about where Indian cricket was before 2008. Something happened in 2008. It was the IPL. The IPL started in 2008. Before 2008, Indian cricket had very low standards. Very low standards when it came to fitness or skills or discipline, barring a few players. A small group of players were good, but even they could not compete with the best teams in the world. England, Australia, South Africa, they could not compete. After 2008, when the IPL started, we had the best salaries in the world that were available in India in the IPL teams. So all the best players from across the world, they made a beeline for India. They wanted to play in the IPL and get those lucrative salaries. Because of that, you had these teams that were set up in India, in which you had a bunch of Indian players. Some were international players, some were domestic players, some were complete raw youngsters who were now in the same mix as international players, the top international players. And that those international, the attitudes and the approaches and the skill sets and discipline and training programs and all that of the international players rubbed off very rapidly on the Indian players. And today, see where India is when it comes to cricket, when it comes to the fitness levels, the discipline, the training programs, everything is world class. Today, even an uncapped youngster isn't scared of playing against a team like Australia because they know they can take them on because they have interacted with those players, right? So that IPL approach needs to be adopted in the Indian academic and research uh, environment. So think of each major university or IIT or whatever as an IPL team. They need to induct foreign talent with the best world class salaries, and they also need to pay the same salary to the Indian employees. So out of every 10 researchers, make let's have 3 foreigners and 7 Indians. And India has the money to make this happen. India just needs the political will, and we need to clean up the the academic system. So if you do this, if India uses the IPL approach in the research and technological research academic environment, then within a decade, India could become one of the top research and technology R&D destinations in the whole world. So this is something that needs to be taken up. You cannot have world-class research output without offering people world-class salaries and world-class environments and world-class labs. So that is something that needs to be taken care of. And the final thing is merit. A nation that does not respect merit will never progress. It's a nation that is doomed. Today, so one kid may score 80% marks, another kid will score 52% marks, and often the kid with the 52% marks will be given the seat that is denied to the kid who scored 80%, right? Because of reservations. This is a complete travesty of justice. That's why people at a very young age. You can't even understand why this happens, and this alienates people. That makes kids feel that the nation doesn't care about them, and that's why they leave the country forever. You talk to NRIs, many of them still feel this way after decades away, that India did not care for them. India pushed them away. So we need to find a political way of ending this reservation system. Everybody should be given the same opportunities. Everybody should be given the same rights and the same privileges. Same opportunities for everybody. Some people do come from financially disadvantaged backgrounds. At a young age, they should be given free education and maybe some financial benefit, financial assistance. But when it comes to marks and entrances, everybody should start from the same position. So India needs to re-establish merit and take away this abysmal, terrible system of reservations, which is hampering the nation's future. So these are things that need to be done in the education system. It's very important we do this. Um, the next thing is rooting out corruption. This is something no one speaks about. It's an open secret that much of the nation runs on corruption, especially at the lower levels. Right? Every Indian citizen comes face to face with this at some point in his or her life, maybe sometimes on a routine basis, depending on how often you interface with various aspects of the governance machinery. And imagine how much money is wasted, citizens' money is wasted every year in giving bribes. So imagine if that money were instead used for national development, how far India would reach. This problem of corruption is an enormous dampener in the entire system. It introduces a huge amount of inertia and a huge amount of inefficiency in the system. And it demoralizes people that they have to pay bribes to get things done, which is actually the right. So this exists at various levels. It exists in various branches of the government. Lots of institutions are affected by this. Let's just put it that way. So this is something that needs to be addressed at some point in time, ideally sooner rather than later. If India is able to cut down this issue by at least 50%, just imagine how far India can go in the next 10-20 years. So corruption needs to be rooted out. That's a major problem that most people don't want to talk about because it is, because of obvious reasons, right? So that needs to be done, and then we need to reform colonial institutions. So many, if not most, of the institutions in India today date back to the British times. And the same institutions were kept on, they were allowed to continue and allowed to function in the exact same way after the British left. So nothing ever changed. So we still have the same colonial approaches and mindset in the people who serve in those institutions. The mindset is that the people of India are a bunch of people who need to be kept down and kept in their place. They need to be oppressed and treated as a colonizer would treat the colonized. That's the attitude that you often see even today. It may still be very prevalent in various institutions in the country. So institutions need to be reformed. The emphasis needs to be on serving the nation and serving the people, not ruling the nation and ruling the people. Right? There needs to be accountability, 100% accountability and 100% transparency in all institutions. This is a work in progress, but it needs to be done if India needs to become a great power, because with colonial institutions, India will never become a great power. And the last thing is, we need to focus on culture and tourism. Culture is something that a cultural revival can only happen when the nation has money, when each person has a significant amount of money, which means a higher GDP per capita, ideally a middle income nation, which means at least $10,000 should be the GDP per capita. Right now it's about 2.5, less than 2.5. So India's economy needs to grow to at least 4 times what it is today. So it needs to become at least a $15 trillion economy for a proper cultural renaissance to be kicked off, right? But we need to start the process now of promoting culture, and that also means promoting tourism, because the tourism industry is a huge industry. India is a sleeping potential tourism superpower. India can become the world's top tourism destination. India has so much to offer to tourists, but it will happen only if it is promoted the right way, and tourists are made to feel welcome in India. So culture, Indian culture is something that can definitely attract millions of tourists per year. And India's uh, architectural heritage, historical heritage, forts, temples, so and natural destinations, forests and beaches and islands and mountains. So much is there. So India needs to promote culture and tourism. India needs to ensure that tourists feel welcome. There should not be any annoying bottlenecks when it comes to tourist entry in India. Let's say you're coming as a tourist on a cruise ship. You need to, your visa process should happen quickly. Typically tourists are made to wait for several hours in a line while two immigration officers take care of a crowd of 2,000 people at a snail's pace. So these bottlenecks need to be addressed. Tourist destinations need to be made tourist friendly, which means good infrastructure, good hotels, good restaurants, good policing, all of that. So a lot needs to be done, but there's a huge amount of potential. Tourism can contribute significantly to India's GDP and also to India's image globally. This is more about soft power. Culture and tourism is soft power, but India needs to start focusing on that so that by the time we are a middle income nation, we can start reaping the dividends of the investments we have made today. So culture and tourism is the last sector that I wanted to speak about. So these are the things that India needs to focus on to become a great power. It's going to be difficult. It's not going to be easy to become a $30 trillion economy by 2047. India will have to grow in excess of 9% per year, which is very steep. It's been done before. The Chinese economy grew at double digit rates for close to 2 decades almost. So it can be done. India is not China. India is not a dictatorship. India is not a one party state. It's going to be a difficult ask, but it's not impossible. It has been done by the Chinese in the past, and we can find a different way of getting it done as well. So India will have to grow in excess of 9% per year for the next 24 years to be a $30 trillion economy by 2047. If India grows at a more reasonable uh, pace of 6% per year, India will become a $15 trillion economy by 2047, half of what it can achieve if it grows at 9%. So that's what can happen. I am confident that India, if we all work together, if we all work hard, if we all try to do our best, we can make this happen and make India a $30 trillion economy by 2047. So the question I get asked all the time is, what can the individual do to contribute to the Indian economy and to contribute to geopolitics, right? So the, you need to raise your standards first of all. Like I keep saying, how do you raise your standards? You reject mediocrity, you reject the status quo, you work harder than everybody else, you work really hard, and you do your best to rise to the fullest extent of your potential. That's how you raise your standards. So you either create something or you solve problems, and you can do it as an employer or an employee, right? So to contribute to society, you have to either create something new for society or to solve existing problems, which also provides value to society. So that's what you can do. If you are an entrepreneur, if you're a business person, you have to create jobs. You have to create jobs that will benefit other people and that will benefit society. You have to help others rise as at the same time that you are rising. If you help others, they will help you and you will all rise together. And if everybody approaches has this mindset, adopts this mindset, then it will be much easier for the country to rise and to reach the $30 trillion mark. And lastly, I would say reconnect with your roots, reconnect with your mother tongue, because that is also very important. A rootless nation will never become a great power. So that's what I had to say about this. I am overall very optimistic that India can become a $30 trillion economy and a great world power, a top two world power by 2047. It will not be easy, but it's not impossible. So that's what I have to say about this. Please let me know what you think about this. Do you agree with all of this? Do you have some other sectors that you would like the nation to focus on? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next video.